Hey, welcome everybody. Today, I'm going to share with you 4 fundamentals that you need to understand in order to build a successful freight broker business. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. 4 fundamentals that you need to know about building a successful freight broker business. So if you've been asking yourself questions like, how do I become a freight broker? How do I start a freight brokerage? Those sorts of questions, this is going to be an important training for you. But most importantly, it's not just a step-by-step of, hey, how do I get my MC number? Or how do I set up my office? This is really the day-to-day activities and the core fundamentals that you are going to need to learn in order to not just build a freight broker business, but to build a highly profitable freight broker business. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So in the meantime, hit me up in the comments with the city and state you're logging in from. And I'd love to hear from our veterans. It is Veterans Day. It's Monday, November 11th. We're doing this as a live stream. So love to hear from my veterans and appreciate and am humbled by your service, no matter where that may be in our military. So thank you so much for that. Today is Veterans Day, so honor them, please. But yeah, hit me up in the comments with the city and state you're logging in from, and I'd love to hear from the veterans. And I'd love for the audience to, show a little respect and appreciation for everything and all the sacrifices that our veterans do and have for hundreds of years. Okay, so welcome. Cynthia so here's the agenda before I do this. We're going to do some shout outs. Then we're going to do a live training where I'm going to talk about the 4 fundamentals. And then we're going to go into live Q&A at the end. Okay, so that's the basic framework of what we're going to do. Let me do some shout outs to start, and then we'll get the ball rolling here, okay? So Cynthia from District Heights, Maryland, she's always here. Carl Gillis from Bethlehem, Georgia. Renee from Rochester, my neighbor. Betty Jones from Wilson, North Carolina. Alexander from Chicago. Case Transportation from Pasadena. Brian Daniels from Independence, Oregon. Old Young from Chicago. Danielle Gauss from Columbia, South Carolina. Glad you're here, Danielle. Simon from Orlando, Florida. And Corey Buchan from Billings, Montana. Boy, you guys are going to get snow soon, right? Have you gotten snow out in Montana yet? I know you guys sometimes get hit with snow in October. I'm assuming you probably already have some snow. Then we've got the TMP Hustler from San Antonio. We got Wendy Archer from Washington, D.C., sophomore from L.A., CJ from L.A. Cool. All right, so again, after we do the shout outs, we're going to jump into the live training. We're going to talk about 4 fundamentals of becoming a freight broker, all right? Becoming a successful freight broker. Let me add that. Because I'll be honest with you, it's very easy to become a freight broker. The steps to become a freight broker are very simple, right? You could learn those in 10 minutes, right? It might take you a little bit of time to implement them, but to become a successful freight broker that's growing a highly profitable freight broker business, that's kind of where we're going to hone in on today. Okay. All right. Jose from Las Vegas. Welcome. Torrance from Turner, Louisiana. Torrance Turner from LA. Sorry. Torrance. All right. My bad. All right. So you're from LA. All right, cool. All right, guys. So we're going to let a couple more people get live. Do me a huge favor. No matter where you're at, hit the like button. If you guys want me to show up every week for free on Mondays and do these live trainings, hit the like button. Let other people know. Share the stream if you're on Facebook or if you're on LinkedIn. Do a repost. Totally appreciate it. Again, we don't really do a lot of paid ads. Most of the people hear about Freight Broker Bootcamp from others, right? That you engaging in the social media or sharing or liking. So I appreciate that. And again, for those of you that are curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent, you can check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. That's my online freight broker startup program. Trained over 10,000 students to that program. It's probably closer to 20. I haven't done an accurate count. I just got sick of updating it. And we offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee for anybody that enrolls in that online course. Okay. So Michael finally made it to the live. Awesome. Very cool. Awesome. All right. Very good. All right, guys. So here's today's notes. This is what I have to go over. So there's quite a bit we got to go over. So we're going to dive in. Let me grab a quick drink and then we will get this show on the road. All right, so give me one sec. Oh, there it is. Sorry. So today I'm going to share with you 4 fundamentals in order to become a successful freight broker. All right. If you want to start your own freight brokerage or become a freight broker, or how to start a freight brokerage, or how to start your own freight broker business, if those are questions that you've had on your mind, you're going to really enjoy this training, because not only am I going to share with you some of how to start your freight brokerage, but I'm going to share with you how to become a successful freight broker, because I'm going to share with you 4 fundamentals, 4 core fundamentals that you need to understand in order to be a successful freight broker. So lean in, pay close attention, because I'm going to run through these 4 and we're going to break them down a little bit for you. Number 1, okay, so these are the notes we're going to go over today. Number 1 is sourcing and dispatching trucks. All right, so what does that mean? Well, as a freight broker or a freight agent, you're going to have some questions you need to understand, like, how do I find and source carriers, motor carriers, trucking companies? Typically, when you start out as a freight broker, you're going to be using something called a load board, like the DAT or Truck Stop or Direct Freight, or any number of different load boards, which are websites. They're basically hubs where freight brokers and carriers come together to try to help service shippers. All right. So that is one of the things you're going to need to understand: finding and sourcing carriers. Again, startups typically are using load boards. And then another core question you're going to have is, how do I vet new carriers? How do I do a background check on new carriers to make sure, to help ensure good service and to prevent fraud? You know, something like that. You're probably going to use the FMCSA Safer site, or maybe you're going to use some outsourced tool like Carrier 411 or Highway or CarrierOK.com. You know, those are all different SaaS products and software that can help you with that vetting process to ensure that your carriers are that are actually qualified to haul the freight. They have active authority and insurance and those things, but also to avoid fraud. All right. So that's number 2. Number 3, you're going to need to learn some dispatching best practices when you're dispatching the truck. And what I mean by dispatching is, after you've covered the load, maybe you covered a load today, the load's going to pick up tomorrow. You're going to have to dispatch that driver into the pickup location. And then you're going to have to track that shipment through to delivery. So that's all part of the dispatch process. So there are best practices and mistakes to avoid. Those are core things that you're going to need to understand. And then last but not least, on the carrier side, you're going to need to learn how to develop strong carrier relationships. Because after you source a carrier from the load boards as a startup, you're going to then want to develop a relationship with them where you can continue to do business with them, recurring on different shipments that meet their specific needs as well as your customer specific needs. Okay. So that was number 1, sourcing and dispatching trucks. It's a very important operational function. It's very learnable. It's not that difficult, but you need some basic training and fundamentals in order to learn how to do that. All right. So that's number 1. Number 2, you need to learn how to rate shipments. All right. So this is a question I get a lot. Dennis, how do I provide a freight quote? How do I rate shipments? How do I do this, Dennis? What do I need to do? Because, there's some nuances to it. So I'm going to share a couple of things you need to understand. First, you need to understand the difference in the types of shipments, like full truckload versus LTL versus partials, right? So those are different types of shipments, right? So you need to learn some of those fundamentals. You need to learn the difference between spot market rates and contract rates, all right? And so that's a very important one. Like most freight brokers start in the spot market. So, one of the big things you need to understand as a broker is, how do I find the spot market rate from point A to point B? If my shipper has a load from Buffalo to Atlanta that's going on a flatbed, how do I know what it's going to cost me to pay a truck so that I can then add my margin on top and provide a freight quote? So you need to understand how to find the spot market rate. There's a process for that, right? And then last but not least, how much profit do I add? How much is fair? How much is reasonable? How much is expected? right? How much can I make on a shipment? Am I going to make $200 on a shipment, or am I going to make 20 bucks on a shipment, right? Well, the fact is from a full truckload perspective, most brokers earn between 10 and 20% on any given load. For example, if they charge the shipper $2,000, okay, that's the all-in rate to the shipper, they're typically going to make somewhere between $200 and $400 on that one shipment, with an average probably being somewhere in the 15% range, which would be about $300 in profit, okay? So those are a couple of things you need to understand from a rating perspective. I actually did a training recently on steps for doing freight quotes. So you can probably see that here somewhere on the screen. I'll put it up here in the edit. And so that is rating shipments. That is a very important component, because no matter how good of a salesperson you are, no matter how good you are at operations, no matter how good you are at these other areas, right? If you don't understand the cost basis and you're not able to quote competitively, you're going to spin your wheels. All right. So that's a very important part. Oh, and by the way, listen, stick around for number 4, because number 4 is by far the most important skill, the most important fundamental that you have to learn in order to become a successful freight broker. Now, all of these are important, but number 4 is exponentially more important in my opinion. Okay. Number 3, financial management. All right, you need to learn the fundamentals of financial management. And I can tell you that this scares the bejesus out of most entrepreneurs, out of most freight brokers, out of most freight agents. Why? Well, they probably don't handle their personal finances very well, so they're concerned with handling the business finances, and that's a legitimate concern. So there's questions like, what is factoring? How do I use other people's money? Factoring, just in a quick version, is it's kind of an alternative financing that allows you to pay your carriers before you get paid by your shippers. So it allows you to quickly pay carriers. Now, I'm not going to dive into a lot of detail, but that's how you're able to use other people's money and not have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in the bank waiting to pay carriers. You use factoring. Most freight broker startups use some form of factoring, okay? So that's an important part of financial management, right? How do I invoice shippers? What is the necessary paperwork? What do the invoices need to include? What does that look like? How do I actually invoice them? Is it done online? Is it done on paper? Is it EDI? How do I invoice my shippers, right? So that's a very important component, and that's all part of building a successful freight brokerage, and a key component to what I teach in my Freight Broker Bootcamp online startup program. So if you're curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent, you can check it out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Again, we trained over 10,000 students, and we offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee. So you can check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. All right, so that's number 3. And again, so we're talking about financial management. What is factoring? How do I invoice my shippers? How do I make sure I pay my carriers on time? How do I pay my carriers? Do I send them a check? Is it an ACH? What other formats can I send carriers? Another question you need to understand is, basic bookkeeping. I mean, keeping some basic records, right? Keeping receipts, keeping all your documentations, making sure that your finances are clean, right? So bookkeeping, one of the cool things about bookkeeping is that it's very easy to outsource. Now, you're probably not going to need that initially, but after your first few months and you start moving some loads, you might want to bring on a bookkeeper to help you with some of the financial management, especially if you don't feel comfortable with that. You're going to want to keep some clean books. You want to make sure you keep all your receipts and all your documentation for tax purposes, right? And then last but not least, on the financial management, you're going to need to learn how to pay taxes, right? You're going to have to pay some quarterly taxes for estimated income. You're going to need to pay some different income taxes, right? So you're going to need to file corporate taxes because you're probably going to have an LLC or an S Corp. And that I would strongly suggest that you outsource to a CPA or someone who's a financial advisor who's qualified on the financial side and the tax side to help you with that, okay? And last but not least, drum roll please, okay? That was financial management. Number 4 is sales, freight broker sales, and how to get shippers as a freight broker. All right, so this is one of the fundamentals that a lot of brokers struggle with, Okay. And they struggle because maybe they don't come from a sales background, or maybe they don't understand the sales process. They don't understand some of those key components, right? So, one of the key things here in freight broker sales is you need to create and identify your freight niche. You need to identify, what is my freight broker niche? Am I focused in on vans or flatbeds or reefers? Am I focused more on the steel industry, the produce industry? Is there a specific geography that I'm going to focus in on? Again, this is all covered in my Freight Broker Bootcamp Startup Program, but finding your niche is an important one. Second, you're going to want to learn how to create a list of shippers, of potential shippers, of prospects, right? So if you're focused in on the oil and gas industry, what companies are you going to call? What companies are you going to contact? What companies are you going to prospect, right? So you need to be able to create that list. And then you also need to understand how to do basic cold outreach, because chances are you're not going to know any of these companies. You're not going to know any of these people. So you're going to need to learn how to do some basic fundamental cold calling and cold emailing and leveraging LinkedIn, and maybe some face-to-face sales when the opportunities come up, and maybe some networking and referrals. So these are all outreach strategies and how you can get shippers as a freight broker. Okay. So this is one of the core components that is really challenging for some people. And I can tell you that that's the reason why I started my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator. Now, let me explain to you really quickly what that is. That is an 8-week live coaching program where I take that piece of my brain, I transplant it into your head, and I teach you everything I know about freight broker sales, strategies, tactics, tools. But most importantly, I teach you the same freight broker sales system that I use to do over $200 million as a freight broker, and what many of my students have went on to do to get many customers, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in revenue for their businesses. Okay. So that is the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator. Again, it's currently sold out, but if you want to get on the wait list, you can check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com/waitlist. Okay. Again, freightbrokerbootcamp.com/waitlist, and you'll be the first to be notified when new spots open up. All right. So listen, we're going to run through those really quick. Number 1, sourcing and dispatching trucks. Number 2, rating shipments. Number 3, financial management. And number 4, freight broker sales and how to get shippers. So do me a favor. If you enjoyed this training, if you learned anything at all, hit me up, or make sure you hit the like button. And then in the comments, do me a huge favor and let me know 1 to 10 how you rate this video. 1 is, Dennis, this was terrible and a complete waste of my time. 10 is, I absolutely loved it. Anywhere in between. If it's anything less than an 8, give me some feedback along with your ratings to let me know how I can improve this training, because I'm here for you. This is why I want to do this. I want to make this valuable for you. All right. And listen, if you want to learn the 7 steps to become a freight broker, the 7 simple steps to become a freight broker, all you got to do is go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/7 steps. You'll get a free download. You get a free cheat sheet that'll walk you through that entire process. So thank you guys for being here. Truly appreciate it. And we'll see you next week on the next Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. Okay, cool. So for those of you that want to stick around for the live Q&A, hold tight. Okay. We're not going to take questions yet, but hold tight. Listen, if you guys enjoyed this training, if you got any value out of it at all, do me a huge favor and hit the like button. That's all I ask. That's your price of admission. And make sure you try to rate me, or, give me some sort of rating in the comments, from 0 to 10, 1 to 10, right? I need that feedback from you, not to placate my ego, but because you have to understand, on my YouTube channel, first of all, I've done almost 200 live freight broker lives. Okay. These live trainings, almost 200 of them. But I also have over 300 free freight broker training videos on my YouTube channel. So what you have to understand is sometimes it gets challenging to come up with interesting and compelling and relevant topics for you. Okay. So I can do these free trainings. So, any feedback you can give me is greatly appreciated. Any topics that you think are interesting would be greatly appreciated. Love to hear your feedback, right? As long as it's constructive, I'm good. All right. So thank you for the kind words. Thank you for the feedback, everybody. That's awesome. Very cool. 10, 10, 10, 10. Oh, don't I feel special? Thank you so much. I do appreciate it. But listen, if I was a 5, just tell me why. If I was a 7, tell me how I can improve it. That's all I ask for, okay? All right, cool. So I'm going to grab a quick drink, and then we're going to jump into live Q&A. If you guys have questions, you can start typing them in the comments. I probably will not get to everybody's questions today, but I will do my best in the time allotted to try to answer your questions. If I don't have the answer, I'll try to point you in the right direction. Okay, is that fair? All right, so hit me up in the comments with questions. I'll do my best to try to answer or give you some valuable resources to go to and get the answer. All right, cool. So here's a question from Michael Fisher. Do you have, whoa, wait a minute. Oh, hold on a minute. Let me go to the first one. I can go in order. Old Young, is a broker ever liable if a carrier gets into an accident? Okay, so Old Young has a question. Is a broker ever responsible or liable if a carrier gets into an accident? Okay, so there is sometimes some debate around this, but here's what you have to understand as a freight broker. You are not liable for freight claims, and you are not liable for accidents, okay, if there was an accident, unless you are negligent. Now, let me explain to you what I mean. If you as a broker are negligent, meaning you hired a carrier that didn't have a freight broker authority or had a really bad driving record, right, or a CSA score, or didn't have the proper insurance, okay, those are examples of how you could be found negligent. So if you follow how to vet carriers properly and how to dispatch carriers properly, you should not have an issue. Now, here's what you have to understand about the United States. Anybody can sue for any reason. It's kind of ridiculous, but it is what it is, right? So in the business climate, typically what happens if there was an accident with a trucking company and say someone was injured, they're typically going to go after the shipper, but they may also go after the broker if they think that they're going to be able to try to claw some money out of them, right? Most of these cases are going to either settle or get dismissed. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. Here's what I can tell you. I did over $200 million of freight broker, never had an issue. I don't know any of my clients that have ever had an issue. And I've trained over 10,000 students. But what I'm not telling you is to be reckless. You have to get trained properly. You have to learn the basic fundamentals of vetting and dispatching and understanding how to operate legally so that you're not negligent. Okay? So I hope that helps. Michael Fisher asks, do you have an all-in-one go-to video for those of us that don't know much of anything about brokering? Yes, I do. If you go to my YouTube channel, freightbrokerbootcamp.com/YouTube, and you go to the channel and under videos, you search for how do freight brokers make money? I put together a 17-part process starting from selling all the way through collecting your invoice and paying your carriers. So if you go to my YouTube channel, freightbrokerbootcamp.com/YouTube, and I think I have that somewhere on here. Let me see. Yeah, if you go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/YouTube, and then you search under videos for how do freight brokers make money, I walk you through a 17-part step-by-step process, okay? So I think that should help you. I think that's what you're looking for. It's a very popular video because most people don't understand the steps that go into it, and that breaks it down for you, all right? All right, let me scroll down here, find where I was. Okay, Anisha asks, will you also taking some doubts if we have any? Will you also taking some doubts if we have any? Be a little bit more specific, Anisha, if you could. I'm not quite sure what you're asking, but I would try to help. Will you also be taking, yeah. Be a little bit more specific and I'll try to help, okay? Renee asks, can you create a list for us of carrier checking sites for insurance, etc.? Can you create a list for us of carrier checking sites for insurance? Well, typically what happens is you are going to use a vetting tool like Carrier 411, or you're going to use, maybe you'll use the Safer site, which also includes license and insurance, the last known insurance from the FMCSA, or maybe you'll use, Carrier OK or Highway or things of that nature. So those are vetting tools. And one of the important parts about vetting tools is that they do cover and include the insurance side, right? RMIS, I think, is one of the big ones for truck stop. So yeah, those are some of, maybe I'll try to do a video on that in the future, but in the meantime, hopefully that helps you, Renee. D'Angelo friend, thank you for popping in, my friend. Good to hear from you. Thank you for the feedback, everybody. Love it. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for the feedback. I appreciate it. Okay, Jose says, I'm starting as a freight agent. I have my first movement. How still getting more deals and more shippers? Well, Jose, I don't know how you got your first shipment, but it sounds like however you got your first shipment worked. You might want to try to replicate that. But as a general rule, freight broker startups get most of their customers, for their first 5 or 10 customers, from either people that they know, referrals from people that they know, or some sort of cold calling or cold outreach. Those are probably the 3 biggest channels for freight broker startups to get their first 5 or 10 shippers. All right. And so this is a common question and this is a common struggle. And so I'm going to share with you really quick. If you are struggling to get shippers and you need help and you're looking for a mentor, you're looking for a coach, you're looking for someone to walk you through and work with you hands-on on how to get shippers, check out my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator program. That is an 8-week live coaching program where I take that piece of my brain, I transplant it into your head, and I teach you my Freight Broker sales system. And I coach you personally, coach you for 8 weeks live. Now that program is sold out right now, but you can get on the wait list and be notified, one of the first people to get notified when new spots become available. Spots become available sometimes every week. Sometimes they don't become available for a month. It depends upon my schedule, depends upon how many people are in the program. So if you get on the wait list, you'll be sure to get notified. Now, this is not a free program. This is not a cheap program, but if you get on the wait list, you will get notified and you'll make sure you have an opportunity to jump on a call with either myself or someone on my team as a quick interview. And if we find out that, that we're a good match to work together, then we'll enroll you in the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator. And we've had rave reviews from our students on that program. So I hope that helps. Okay, I'm kind of jumping around here, but I may have missed some things. If I did, I'm sorry. Okay, question from TMP Hustle. As a freight agent, I find it difficult to overcome customers that say our freight is customer routed. Okay, cool. So listen, here's the thing. There is no rebuttal to convince a customer that says their freight is customer routed. If their freight is customer routed, it means they don't control the freight spend or the carrier or broker selection for that load. It means their customer does. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a workaround on how you might be able to convert that into a possible opportunity. If their outbound freight is customer routed, the question you need to ask them is, how do they handle their inbound raw material shipment? So for example, let's say, you are the buy company who sells these drinks. Now, they make the juice that's inside this bottle, but they probably don't make the labels, they don't make the bottles, and they don't make the tops. Those are probably all sourced from other companies. And then they put this all together. So just because this is being shipped to their customer routed, and their customers paying for the freight and managing the freight, the inbound materials, a lot of times the manufacturer or co-packer will be handling this because they will have to source that those inbound raw materials. They'll have to source the bottles and the caps and the labels and all of that. They'll probably even have to source the ingredients of the actual buy drink. Okay, so that's what you want to ask. You want to ask, how do you handle your inbound shipments? How do you handle your raw materials? And if you know what their product is, then you might even say, if it's buy, you might say, listen, where do you source your bottles from, and how is that freight managed? And the reason why I tell you this is because there's inbound and outbound. Manufacturers all have inbound and outbound freight. Inbound freight is sometimes treated differently than outbound freight. So when you're calling them up, a lot of times they're telling you it's customer routed. That's because it's going direct to the customer, and that customer has control over the selection and freight spend. So I hope that helps. Okay, question from Mohammed. What if a shipper rep says they're not going to get new freight brokers and they have them already? Okay, well, here's first what you need to understand. No need equals no sale. So there's two ways to interpret this. The question, you either believe they're telling the truth or you believe they're lying. If you believe they're telling the truth, then there's no need and there's probably nothing you can do other than ask for an opportunity to follow up down the road and see if the timing is better then. So that might be one way you might treat it. The other way you might do it is how I like to handle we don't use brokers, or we're not currently looking for any brokers. If they're not currently looking for any brokers, the challenge there is you have to try to make a good first impression. And the reason why you probably got this objection is because you sound like everybody else. You're probably using one of those generic sales scripts like, hey, we got trucks in your area. I thought we might be able to help you out. Or, hey, I'm a freight broker and we might be able to save you some money. Can I do a quote? Those sorts of things, right? The generic sales pitch that every shipper's heard. So you automatically trigger a negative response. But if you use a compelling sales hook, if you do research and you customize your outreach approach to each prospect, which is what I teach in the Sales Accelerator, you are going to start having better conversations with your prospects because you're not going to sound like everybody else. You're going to get an opportunity to make a good first impression. You're going to get an opportunity to ask some follow-up questions and try to identify some need. But what I find is that most brokers, when they use these generic sales scripts, are getting blown out of the box and they never get an opportunity to have a real conversation, and they run into an objection in the first 15 seconds. Now, another thing you're going to want to do is learn how to disarm your prospect, because usually that's a trigger event where you said something and it triggered them and said, we're not looking for any new brokers, right? So it's kind of an automated response. You need to learn how to disarm them in such a way that you can then bring them back into the fold and continue the conversation. So some way you might disarm them is when they say that, say, listen, whoa, hold on a second, Mohammed. I'm not even sure I can help you. Okay. But I want you to understand something up front. I'm not here trying to steal their business. I'm not here to try to displace your current providers. I know you have a long-term relationship with them. But what I thought would be relevant is, based on our experiences, if we could find some gaps or some holes or some places where we might be able to help support you, that's all I'm really looking for. So I'm not here to try to steal anybody's business. And to be honest with you, I don't even know if I can help you yet. That's the reason why I wanted to schedule a short call. Now, do you see how I disarm them? Because a lot of times what you have to understand is shippers are going to be very protective of vendors that they've been working with for a long time. And so sometimes that's the reason for that trigger response. So learning how to disarm the prospects is very important. If you go to my YouTube channel, I have an entire training on it. Okay. Hope that helps. Question from Torrance. Is it possible to have contract agreement between a freight broker and a shipper to handle 25% or more if the load's being shipped from the warehouse? You can have a contract for anything. I don't know that the shipper will sign it. Most freight brokerage operates in the spot market with no guaranteed volume contract. Okay. Now you can get dedicated volume contracts with shippers, but most brokers operate in the spot market. Now, if you are working with them in the spot market and they are looking for more, they're looking for more access, they're looking for more support, they're looking for more service, you might be able to offer them a volume service level agreement where you're like, listen, we will guarantee that we'll move 10 loads a week for you in this lane, right? So that you can then take that off your list. We'll even give you a little bit of a discount based on volume. Okay. And so, that's something that you can do. I've done that as a broker where we were guaranteed a certain amount, but in most cases, brokers are going to live in the spot market, week to week, month to month. Okay. So, you can do it. You absolutely can do it. It's a little bit of a tougher sell to the shipper. Now, if the shipper's coming to you and asking you for more, then that might be the opportunity to do it. So I hope that helps. Jose, thank you for the feedback. Thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, these trainings can't be hours long. So you're right. I cannot go into granular detail on everything. I talk about the overall, and then that kind of plants the seed for you to do some additional exploration. And if you decide to do the Freight Broker Bootcamp online training, great. But you got to understand, these videos can't be hours long. The lives can't be hours long. So it's really hard to break it down granular, but I'm trying to give you the framework and the fundamentals on what you need to focus on, not necessarily the nitty gritty. Okay. So, but good point. Thank you for the feedback. Okay. Question from Jose. Awesome. Thank you. It was by cold calling, but was not able to move heavy construction equipment. And my first move was a grand piano, and happy for that. Thanks. Good. Awesome. Question from Old Young. Is it a good idea to go after newly founded manufacturing companies? Okay. Well, it depends on what you mean by newly founded. If you have a company that's less than a year or two old, then the challenge there is credit. They may not have good credit or established credit, so it may be hard to factor those invoices. So if they don't have good credit, then it becomes a higher risk for you because, of course, a manufacturing startup that's in their first year or two of business is still a higher risk to do business with than a company that's been around for 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years and is more established for obvious reasons. Second of all, their revenue is probably going to be a lot lower. So I don't necessarily have an issue with it, but I'm not sure you would want to focus exclusively on that. You're going to want to probably focus on companies that have been around for at least 5 years. Maybe they're doing at least $5 or $10 million in sales minimum on their way up to maybe 100 million, 200 million, 500 million. Those are small to medium sized companies. So I wouldn't necessarily focus on manufacturing startups unless you're not worried about them paying the bills or you're willing to take that extra risk. Okay. And they're typically going to be much smaller volume too. Okay. So I hope that helps. Okay. So I think that's it, guys. That's the last question I got on the list. I appreciate you guys being here and I really appreciate the feedback. Okay. So if you guys are curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent, just check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com for my startup program. If you need help getting shippers and you're looking for a freight broker sales mentor and coach, go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/waitlist so you can get all the details on my freight broker sales accelerator program. Danielle, thank you for the kind words. Everybody, thank you for being here. I will be doing another live training every Monday at noon Eastern. You can check it out on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I stream it on all those channels. Do me a huge favor. If you haven't hit the like button yet, hit the like button. Truly appreciate you being here. Have an awesome day. Have an awesome week. And I will see you next week on the next Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. Thanks all.